All right, can anybody hear me? I cannot see anybody. Anybody hear me out there? My microphone is showing that it's working.
Okay. I hope but do you see anyone there?
No, I see them all logged in. Yes, I do see them logged in, but it's not.
Okay, do you see where it says participants?
Yes.
Click on that, oh boy. And you should be able to see whether there are, I'm already in Zoom, so let me go in here, let me join.
Oh, okay, I need to allow them all to talk, okay?
Well, yeah, you need to promote them to panelists.
Director, can you hear me?
Yeah, Ramsey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. So at least I'm through. So whatever you did with me, if you do it with everyone else, we should be good.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Mr. Liberty?
Yeah, we're working our way through it right now.
Okay,
Hello.
it just hit an unmute button. I hit that.
This is Jan, if you can hear me, Ed.
Okay. Suhei, are you online? We're just waiting for Suhei to join. There was a problem. Oh, you there, Suhei?
I am.
Okay, so Suhei has joined us, and
Just bear with
This is
me
David
one
Sims.
moment.
Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
yeah, let's bear with Suhei for a moment while she gets everything set up. We had a problem getting logged in for some reason. We use this thing almost every week. I'm not sure what happened today, but we're almost there.
Hello, this is Ryan Oblander. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ryan, we can hear you.
It says chat is disabled, so I'm not sure if I'm a full-fledged panelist, but at least I can speak and mute myself.
Let me see.
I am working through everything. Just bear with me one moment because my computer also shut down on me and I'm regaining access again. So just bear with me one moment. Let's see. Okay, so am I able to promote you as panelists? Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna start one by one promoting everyone to panelists. Let me know if that works.
I think that worked for me at least.
Perfect.
You know what, Suhei, you and I may both be in there as panelists right now because we're both showing up as utility admin because I went ahead and logged in, like you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Not sure there's a guest. I'm not sure if they're also part of the meeting or they're just here as a public participant.
So they're showing up on the screen as having called in from a cell phone that ended
Yes.
8641. So
Yes.
8641, can you identify yourself?
It's okay if they don't want to. I'm just not going to promote them to panelists.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm getting ready to pull up the agenda here. But as you know, it's pretty much straightforward. Share the screen. Okay. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. Perfect. We can start the meeting because I believe, Ed, did you start the recording?
Yes, I did start the recording.
All
should-
right. Perfect.
Yeah, because the only option I see now is to pause or stop recording. So it must be recording.
All right. Perfect. Perfect. So we will start the meeting and I'll upload the video, excuse me, later to YouTube.
Okay, great. All right, well, thanks for sorting that out. Hopefully everyone's here that needs to be here. Welcome everyone to the February 7th Electric Utility Advisory Board meeting. We can begin with the roll call.
All right, Ramsey Stevens,
Present.
Theodore Beals,
Close. It's Belois, but
Belos. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
present.
Thank you. David Sims,
Here,
Matt Portilla. Not here for the roll call. Ryan O'Blander
Here.
and Eric Jeffers. Okay, not here for the roll call.
Okay. I'm not sure if we have a quorum tonight, but we'll just continue on anyway. Let's see here.
I
Who-
believe 1, 2, 3. We probably do, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. All right, well, let's continue with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Stevens, would you do us the honor?
Of course, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, are there any additions, deletions, reordering to the agenda?
No,
Okay, and are there, the presentation I'm aware of is going to be taking part of unfinished business A, so are there any other presentations this evening?
no, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And since we had some technical difficulties, I'm not sure if members of the public are here today, is there anyone from the public that wants to leave a comment on something today? If
I
you
did not receive any via, the email.
Okay, is there anyone in our group right now that's online as an attendee that has their hand raised or anything like that?
No,
Okay. Moving on to the approval of the minutes. I hope everyone saw the email with the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting on November 14th?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of November 14th, 2023.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second,
who's second? I'm sorry.
that's Theodore. Second,
Oh, thank you.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
aye.
Okay, so there's no nays that I heard. Moving on to unfinished business A, solar renewable energy credits. Mr. Liberty, you have the floor. Is he still with us?
I believe so. Well, he did log in as the as utility admin as well to get the meeting going. Not sure if we're having a problem there.
Well, I know
Susan, do you wanna?
yeah, there's a presentation. While you're sorting out that technical issue of logging in, maybe we can just go ahead and begin the
Correct.
slideshow.
Susan, can you hear me?
Yeah, this is Bob Nokowski from FMPA. Do you want me to kind of introduce myself and start before Ed joins?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
All right, so I'm Bob Nokowski. I'm the Principal Strategic and System Planner at FMPA. And let me share my screen.
Let me stop share. Okay.
All right, does everyone see the screen?
Not yet.
No, wait.
Now it's showing, for me at least.
Yes.
Yes.
yes,
Excellent. So take this opportunity to discuss kind of the rec market, what it is, what the opportunities and some of the risks. So what exactly is a rec? A rec is the renewable attribute of the generation. So you have the generation itself, and then you have the attribute, and in case of a REC, it's that renewable energy certificate. It can either be sold with the energy as a bundle package, or it can be unbundled and sold separate from the energy. So usually a buyer buys a REC to offset their emissions, whether it's a company or a utility. And the sellers will sell the REC separate because they can get a higher price for the REC than just the energy. When you certify a REC, not all RECs are certified, but you can certify them using Green EE, etc. And that prevents double counting and allows them to be retired. So you get the credit for it. And different states and regions have renewable portfolio standards. I think there's like 29 or so states that have them. And what that means is they have a requirement of clean energy at different tiers, and that is actually connected to their systems, and that's the RPS. And then they also created this idea called the Clean Energy Standard, which is kind of a broader definition, which allows some credit trading in there. It's for clean energy, but not as clean or directly tied to the system. So on the right, you can see California has a goal, I think it's 2030, but to be connected to 50 to 74% clean energy or zero emission energy, and then they have this clean energy standard, which they said they'll be 100%, which means they have a looser definition for that remaining 26%. So why are we talking about this? Because we're all part of solar projects. And it's because our members wanted to build them. So part of the reasons why we went ahead and built solar projects or get involved is because it meets our customers' desire to have solar and clean energy. It supports CO2 emission reduction goals. It enables us, the retail customer, to have subscription programs so the utility can give that relationship directly to the customer. And it also provides some diversity to natural gas. So depending on your amount, it kind of stabilizes prices. The big thing to note here is if you sell the REC from your solar project, you can't claim those first three because all the rights that go along with the renewable energy goes along with the REC. So that means you couldn't sell those with solar subscriptions. Theoretically, if you sold in the rears, you'd have to adjust your reporting that you've done in the past on whether or not you have clean energy. So it's one of those things that needs to be carefully weighed. So RECs do have a market value. Now that we have Harmony, which is the FMKA Phase 1 project online, it has been creating energy for a couple of years. We wanted to see if what we could do with the RECs. We don't want to keep them. So we went through and we collected some feedback from our members, whether or not we want to pursue getting revenue or what would be entailed in that process. So we'd have to go through a broker in order to find buyers and sellers and deal with the admin transaction fees. And then it'd be a certification process that exists, so we wouldn't double count and we could retire them correctly. As of now, the ARP hasn't provided or has not given us the feedback that they want to pursue selling RECs and that they actually want to have the RECs for themselves as we're dealing with Harmony. There are some certain risks that would need to be discussed if you would go ahead and sell the RECs. The biggest one is kind of a time domain, and is you wouldn't want to sell too far out because you would potentially get yourself into a situation where you'd want the RECs for credit for regulatory climate reasons, and you wouldn't be able to have them because you've already assigned them to someone else. And the also is once you have to subtract the solar subscription programs from the RECs if you had those assigned. Make sure you didn't double count. So initially we went through just to see what our solar project that we have online has generated so far. So throughout this summer, Harmony is our one ARP project that we have. And so far it's generated roughly 600,000 megawatt hours as an entire for all members of that site. Right now, there's 3 groups of rec holders. There's the phase 1, and then there's the phase 2 and 3, which Lake Worth Beach is part of. And this slide highlights kind of like the process of what happens with the energy. So the energy is created at the solar site. It flows through to the member, where you have to be on top. And then you would take title to the RECs with the energy, where you could sell it with a subscription to your customers. You could sell it just to a broker and sell a REC, and then you would generate that REC revenue that would come back to you. But then you'd lose that entitlement to the attributes. So initially, RECs were developed to spur development of renewables within states. I think that started back in 2000, so it's been about 20 years. And it was, most of the renewable projects back then were done because of this REC program and the RPS. Now it's a little less requirement. As you see, now there's a voluntary market and people are starting to build solar and other renewable projects because they see the benefit of it. And the different states have different levels of RECs and interconnection requirements. And because of that, there's different tiers within the states of the type of RECs that they accept and what kind of energy that's accepted. So the prices in the marketplace depend on alternative compliance payments in that market, whether or not there's the quantity required for compliance versus what's available, and the level of cleanliness. So here in Florida, we do not have a regulated market or organized REC market, so we have a voluntary market where we would be able to sell the RECs to other entities, including private companies. And if you look on the right, there's kind of the tier across all the organized markets. The solar only are top of the hierarchy. Then there's the tier 1, which is the cleanest forms of energy, which is usually solar and wind. And then class 2 and 3 are not as clean. It's depending which state it is, sometimes they even include things like biomass. Overall, through 2021, there has been an increase in the voluntary market with RECs sold. I think it was 23% growth in the last year or so of this data. And the big takeaway from this is both PPAs have grown in size and unbundled RECs, which indicates that if you were going to sell the RECs, you'd be in that unbundled because you'd be taking the energy and then selling the RECs to a third party. It just highlights that in 23, it was a 23% growth in the last year. So we reached out to OUC because they had a REC program. And this slide kind of highlights what they've been doing. They are in the process of changing their process. I'm not sure how that is because we didn't have that discussion with them. They discussed what they have been using in the past. And that's a 12-month cycle. So at the end of the 12 months, they sell their RECs in the rear. And what that means is at the end of the 12 months, they tally up the generation they had, they pay their annual subscription fees, then they interact with the broker. They don't get charged a fee, but other brokers do charge a fee. Then they have an issuance fee. And then if you wanted to get certified, that's the point where you would get certification. That process with OUC wasn't certified. But then they go to the approval of the sale, where they take their sale to the board to be approved. And once the board approves the sale, they would go interact with the broker again, and the broker would make the transactions, and there'd be an exchange of RECs for the exchange of money. It kind of some of the initial fees and setup that goes along with this. You have to certify the site. You certify, you register with the North American Renewable Registry. And there's some setup fees based on the size of your facility. In this case, all facilities are 74 megawatts plus, so it's all net greater than 10 megawatt category. So we look at just Lake Worth Beach and its projection. So 24, the first Rice Creek project comes online, which I think it's expected to come online in August. And then Penaway is supposed to come on Penaway comes on in 2026. So you see that you're gonna ramp up and expect roughly 146,000 megawatt hours a year starting in 26. So the question is, what is that worth in the voluntary market? So based on the last couple of years of prices we've gathered, we reached out and AUC gave us some values. We also looked on through some professional resources and got another NCAP. So it looks like the price is roughly 20 cents to $4 a megawatt hour. And there's no rhyme or reason why things do different. What drives it in the voluntary market depends on the year and what other policy decisions that people want to make. So here it's a wide range. So you look at 26's, what could be an estimated revenue would go anywhere from $30,000 to almost $600,000. So if you went ahead and registered your site and your RECs with the North American Renewable Registry, there's a one-time registration fee, which is $1,000, and then there's an account fee as well. Then there'd be a subscription fee, which is the $2,000 a year. And then there's volumetric fees, which you pay based on the number of RECs that you're selling in the marketplace. So what we originally put out there was that FMK could pursue revenue for the RECs for the phase 2 and 3 projects. And this slide deck was created to get that feedback from the participants if there was some sort of action we wanted to do to sell it. And generally, we expected that if this was going to be something we wanted to pursue, we would follow that same basic registration and process that we saw AUC do, with the exception we would certify them. And then you have to do the master agreements with the brokers. We get the higher certification and make sure that we track the retirements correctly. Then again, any kind of REC sale would take away from the rights that renewable energy. Which leaves us, we put this kind of word of caution out there is, ideally you want to limit the size of your REC sale to maybe 12 months in arrears. That way it's small, it reduces your exposure to the risk of regulatory uncertainty. That way if you can adjust for the renewable credits if you need them for your own portfolio. And then also with talking with the broker, it wasn't really clear there's a process how to kind of add it back into your generation mix if you sold those renewable resources. Because right now, when you have solar, you take credit for 0 emission megawatt hours in your generation mix. And it's unclear how you would go back in time if you sold those RECs, how to account for that energy. But it would have to be noted, because you would no longer have claim to that renewable and that 0 emission energy. And that kind of ends the main part of the presentation. So with that, I open up to questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I just had one question.
Yes.
The city of Lake Worth Beach and the utility itself has carbon reduction goals for the future. If we were to sell our rights, as it were, would that detract from those goals? Would that take away anything? So if we were, say, to be 100% carbon neutral by, I don't know what the time it was, 35 years, 40 years that we agreed upon. If we-
2045.
2045. If we sold these RECs, would that be counterproductive toward those goals?
It would be, because you would have to claim the energy you took from the energy that had the REC associated with it. You couldn't claim that was zero emissions, so theoretically you couldn't make zero emissions if you gave those rights away.
So that would be counterproductive toward our goals.
Yes.
Okay. That was the only question I had.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's our Lake Worth utility that could sell RECs, even though we're purchasing it from this field, like we don't generate it, someone else generates it. These solar fields of OUC generate it, but we can sell credits, not OUC?
So what happens is, in the case, let's use Harmony for example. Harmony is a PPA arrangement with us, so we registered the site. There's another operator that owns and operates it, so they transfer the energy plus the RECs to us. So I think OUC went ahead and they registered the site, make sure it was in that NAR. So it's accredited, so then they have title to the RECs and they can do with what they want with the RECs.
No, but I think to get more directly to David Sims's question, David, as I understand it, the RECs are our property, so we are a part owner of the output. So we're under contract to receive the output from the solar project. The RECs and the energy transferred to us, unless we choose to sell the RECs, in which case we would only get the energy.
All right, that makes sense.
Yep, but the RECs under contract, both in the power sales contract, they transfer to us from the power purchase agreement. So for example, Origis has a power purchase agreement with FMPA. So the RECs transfer to FMPA, and an FMPA has a power sales contract with City of Lake Worth Beach. The RECs then transfer from FMPA to the City of Lake Worth Beach. And then we can choose to sell them along the way or retain them and then effectively retire them. But that's the way the contractual path flows.
Okay, yeah, I see that. Could the presenter, could you, I'm not real familiar with this. Could you define attributes for me? You used the term attributes earlier in the presentation. What is an attribute?
Yeah, essentially all it means is the energy has an attribute. So the energy from solar has a zero carbon attribute, and that's how it's used.
All right, I see what you mean. But that's all I have.
Robert, I just have a couple questions. Do these RECs have an expiration date?
They do. It's not a set expiration date. It depends on the market. Because we reach out to a broker and theoretically you can go back a couple years and sell RECs. So we could sell RECs, for example, from 2019 if we have them. But they might fetch pennies on the dollar and it's not worth the sell. So there it is depending on the market, and it's not a set thing.
So the longer the REC goes, the more value it loses?
That's the impression we got when we spoke to the broker.
Okay. And by the way, what's the broker's fee?
I think we had broker's fee was a couple cents a REC.
All right. Well, if you're selling at 40 cents and it's a couple, that's a pretty good margin. But if you're selling at $4, 40 cents to $4 is a big swing. However, basically, can you transfer them to Connecticut? Can you transfer them to the to the Northeast, or is it just in Florida?
That's where you get in. Those have organized markets. So say then there's 30, I think it was 30 states. So in the case if you're talking about the Northeast, where there's New Jersey and Connecticut, they have extremely strict rules on the type of RECs that are allowed, and they have interconnection requirements. So you as a Florida utility cannot sell your RECs to DC, New Jersey, Connecticut, because they can't take credit for it. But you could sell it to Amazon, because then they could reduce their emissions with your RECs.
Okay, I'm sorry, and we can sell it to who? Could you repeat one more time?
For an example, you could sell it to Amazon. That's what Amazon, or a company that's trying to reduce their carbon footprint.
Okay, so we could sell it to private entities or public
Yes.
entities, right? It
And that-
doesn't
and that's what the broker
necessarily
would-
have to be a state utility.
Right, it could be a utility that doesn't have a regulatory market. So they could accept voluntary RECs. But in the states that do, that are under the gun to get to a certain requirement, those states all have very strict rules, and that's hard to, you really can't sell to those markets.
All right, and then my last question is, if you say they only last for 2 years, we're going back to what today's 24, so 2022. Have we seen a rise in what REC values are in those 2 years? Is it an exponential growth, or if you're telling me the ceiling is $4 a REC, what was it in 2022?
Yeah, the information that we had was more of a range.
Okay.
And it wasn't a steady growth, it wasn't exponential growth, it was very chaotic. For the voluntary market. So I think it was back in like 21 or 22, it was really high and it came back down. And then to the point where there's an expiration, there's really not a set expiration, it's not 2 years flat. It's from what the broker was telling us was, we used 2019 as an example when we had that conversation. So there is a little bit of ebb and flow, but usually people want to take credit for their emissions, you know, that year, give or take a year.
All right. That's all I have.
I got a question.
Yes,
Does anybody anywhere in the state or the country have any information on, like, the big picture on overall? Do having and trading RECs, does that reduce the overall carbon emissions? Does that increase the amount of, do anything to increase the amount of clean energy nationwide?
I haven't done the research to give you an answer on that one.
Okay.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Director Liberty, is there any more insight onto the RECs that you want to bring forward?
He is having some connection issues.
Oh.
Yeah, he came in and unfortunately it dropped him off again. So we're waiting on him to log in again to Zoom.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so while we wait, Mr. Stevens, did you have any questions or input?
No, this all makes good sense to me.
Okay. So I guess unfortunately we wait. I wasn't sure if there was any action items that we as a board needed to take tonight, if it was just a matter of a presentation.
I think the director would like our recommendation on whether or not to proceed with this process as outlined, correct?
We will need to wait until Ed gets back in the call. I'm trying to see if maybe I can give him the information for the call number. Just bear with me a moment, okay?
Okay. Can someone cue the Jeopardy music, please?
Mr. Mr. Chairman, I know it's out of order, but should we take board comments in this spirit of using our time efficiently here?
Yeah, we can actually just, I mean, this item is open. We can move forward quickly because of all the technical difficulties. Yeah, that would make sense. And then we can circle back to this. I know our board liaison probably would have some comments of his own, so we won't go that far. But if you want to move forward to board comments, I'm open to changing that up right now.
I mean, I'll make a motion to do so. If it's
Okay. Yeah,
necessary.
that's what I was going to ask next. Do we have a second?
Second,
All those in favor?
aye.
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 Okay, so let's just quickly move to board comments. We're gonna circle back once the technical difficulties are resolved and we get Director Liberty back on the line. Mr. Stevens, since you made that recommendation, do you have any comments?
No, I mean, I will just say as a customer of our utility here, it is very nice to know that the utility is in such good shape. It's been very nice to have a lot of people lately note how improved the system clearly is for us as consumers and how competitive our rates currently are. So just want to express my gratitude to the utility team for everything they've been doing.
If I can just add, and I'm brand new, I've been here 5 minutes on the board, and thank you for welcoming me the last meeting. I was on my cell phone and I couldn't respond back to you guys, but at 40 cents, that's $60,000. That doesn't even get you into a Taylor Swift concert. So, I mean, I am of the opinion that we keep our energy credits and we try to strive towards carbon neutral. But if it's selling at $4 a credit and that's $586,000, yeah, I mean that helps the budget of our city and everything. My problem is the swing is between 40 cents and $4, and that if we can narrow that gap, I think we can make a more informed decision. That's my 2 cents.
All right, well, thank you for that update. That actually would have been a proper comment to make on the item that we just left behind temporarily.
Oh, so I'm okay. Sorry.
Yeah, so do you have any other comments not related to the unfinished business that we temporarily paused?
No, I'm brand new in the community, and so far my electricity does not go off, so I'm pretty pleased with the utility here.
Yeah, that is historically anomalous, I will note. It is really only because of our current utility leadership that you can say that, sir. So,
Okay, well, I've been here a year, and
you got here at the right time is what I'm trying to say.
Good.
Yeah, I have an instance where I had, I don't know what to call this, but it's just one of those things that make you scratch your head. I had one of my transformers in front of my front door replaced because my house faces North A Street. And to see the hierarchy of workers where you have 3 people staring at the other 2 people doing the work, like the supervisor of the supervisor of the supervisor. So I had that in front of my house a couple of weeks ago. A lot of man hours go into making sure everyone is supervised properly when work is being performed.
Well, I live on South 18th Ave, and they are putting in a pump station. And so I see the utility trucks coming up and down my street every morning, and it's a lot of them, but it's a big project. And you are right. They are sitting around. However, if nobody gets hurt and electricity flows, at the end of the day, it's not meant to be efficient. It's meant to be safe.
Correct. Director Liberty, are you with us? I saw you pop in earlier.
I am here now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Ah, perfect. I had to reestablish connection using my own personal computer. For some reason, something's happened. But
Okay.
I haven't heard all the comments, but the few I've heard, fortunately, were good. So thank you very much and complimentary.
Yeah, we took a
Yeah.
brief break from the agenda because of the technical difficulties. We just moved forward to board comments, but that was just a temporary juncture. If there's anyone else that has comments now, we can just address those, and then we can go back to solar energy credit discussion. Mr. Sims, did you have anything?
Just that I met with Director Liberty a few Fridays ago. We took a long tour of the system. I saw our new transformer. I saw a lot of new systems that are going to get ready to go online. Things were looking good.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
thank you. That was a good tour, and I know board member Ramsey Stevens has asked for a tour. Ramsey, I just haven't had time to schedule it yet. I have some family obligations coming up, which is jumping my
worries,
calendar a
Director.
little. But I will
worries.
get back to you, and we'll set something up. Same thing goes for anybody else. If you want to set aside, 2, maybe 3 hours of your time, we can get you out for a tour and show you some of the really cool stuff that's taking place.
Do we ever have tours to the general public anymore?
We don't have general group tours available. That we have not done. It's just very time consuming and difficult logistics. But for smaller, 1 or 2 people at a time, I'd be glad to do that. I try to limit that generally to city commissioners or advisory board members. On a rare occasion, a member of the press is looking to see something and chat, and we do take them around. But to open it up, we'd be consumed with giving general tours all the time. It's very time consuming.
Director, you did just trigger a board comment I'd like to make, or a question I'd like to make, or a question I'd like to ask. I was asked by a proprietor of an unnamed business in town that I'm sure would like to stay anonymous, if we ever do utility incentives for smaller businesses. What is the threshold for coming before the utility and asking for an economic development incentive?
I have to admit that I'm not overly familiar with it, or I'm vaguely familiar. I don't have the specific numbers, but there is an economic development incentive that was standard. It was offered through the Department of Community Sustainability, Director Waters group, and it was used for business development purposes. I can think of maybe one customer that came in under that criteria a number of years ago, and that was the Bodegon supermarket. I think it was tied to creating a certain number of jobs. It might have been 10 jobs, and created a certain level of demand on the system, which I think was up around 150 kW. I'm fuzzy on the details, but Bodegon is the one that came to mind. That was a standard offering. I don't know if that's still in place or if the city commission put those on hold. The other ones that were done, that were larger, that were done by special contract, you all may be familiar. There was one done with the Mid residential development, and also the Bohemian and the Gulfstream Hotel. Those were 3 that I believe were done by special contract, as opposed to that standard offering, which the Bodegon had taken advantage of.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful. I'll follow up with Director Waters if the proprietor has any further questions, or I'll tell them to reach out to him.
Yep.
Okay, are there any further board comments? Going once?
I got one more, and I
Okay.
apologize, but at our last meeting, we were talking about solar credits. I'm sorry, not solar credits, but did we want to give the option that people could utilize solar power versus natural gas? And I've tried explaining it to my neighbors in South Palm Park, and I have failed miserably trying to get the point across. Did we come to any type of decision whether we were even going to give people the option to do that? Where did we leave that subject on the agenda?
You're talking about the solar energy subscription?
Yeah, whether our last meeting, we said solar energy versus natural gas. Did we even want to give the people the option to make the choice, or were they just tied in that they were going to get one or the other? You know, kind of like balls in a vase.
Yeah, I'm just speaking from my own assumption here, but I believe we left it off with that it was more equitable to leave it as is.
Okay.
Director Liberty, do you have a similar or alternate viewpoint on that item that we touched on last November?
Similar with additional details is my recollection that while there was no quorum and no formal vote, there was a consensus among the participants at multiple meetings. I think it was at least 2 meetings to not give the customers the option, but rather leave it as a single bundled offering that was good for all, and not allow a limited number of customers to take the, if you will, the solar marbles from the bowl for themselves and leave the non-solar marbles for everybody else. So the consensus of the group without a quorum for a vote was to just leave it as a mixed bowl, and everybody benefits from the solar portfolio equally.
Okay. So is that subject closed? Are we done on that?
I would say unless the board wants to reopen it, I would say that it's closed. I have not had an inquiry from the city commission on this matter. I'm trying to remember if I gave an update to individual commissioners or not, but I could certainly do that in one-on-one to see if they want to bring it back up. My guess is right now with the schedule for the next month and a half or so leading up to the election that they would not tackle this subject. But certainly if I get an opportunity in one-on-ones, we can let them know what the
No,
consensus
and Director, that's fine. I wanted to know because I had a few neighbors who asked me, and I did not know. So
Right.
if the matter's closed, that's fine.
Yep. I would say it's closed right now unless the advisory board would like to take it up again. Certainly you could.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right. Again, last call for comments before we rotate back to our unfinished business. Anyone? Okay. So let's circle back to where we left off before the technical difficulties kicked back in. Director Liberty, we're basically just as a follow-up to the presentation. Do you have any comments?
It was just a reminder that the purpose of bringing this to you was it's an emergent issue. It's not an emergency, but it's an emerging issue that other cities will be wrestling with. Certainly the FMPA will be wrestling with it on behalf of the All Requirements Project, which is which we are not technically a part of. It's just something to be aware of. The city commission should take this up at some point after the election. We can put it on an agenda for discussion and see how they want to go with it. We currently have renewable energy credits from our own solar field, roughly 2,800 to 2,500 to 3,000 RECs per year that we don't do anything with. We allow them to expire. But as these numbers grow larger, I think you saw from the presentation that we'll begin to receive deliveries of solar from FMPA in the July-August timeframe of this year, with the balance coming during 2025, and we'll be all up to about 140,000 plus RECs per year starting in 2026. So it's not an issue to be dealt with at the moment, but it's something that the policymakers may want to, kick around and consider. So certainly the input of the advisory board would be valuable for them to have, but it's not an issue that they have to deal with right away.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
As I say, in our 10-year budget forecast, which we do annually using this, what we call the Stantec model, we have not ascribed any revenue from renewable energy credits. So it's not like we are planning on monetizing those RECs at the moment. There is no plan to do that at the moment.
Okay. Is there going to come to a point where we have so much solar or renewable energy that it would make sense to go ahead and pursue this versus meeting our carbon neutrality goals first and then, considering this RECs for sale?
That's certainly a possibility. We have the anticipated that we will be on a more aggressive ramp up of solar energy in our portfolio than the city resolution calls for. So we could decide to throttle back and maybe sell some RECs versus keeping them all. Yeah, that could happen. And that could happen, I forget exactly what the midpoint test is. I think we had to be at a certain percentage by 2035 or 20. We're going to be on the aggressive side in terms of renewable energy credits. So we may be able to sell and still meet our goals by 2045. But that's a guess right now. We don't have any firm numbers to confirm that right now.
Yeah, because when I was hearing terms like pennies on the dollar and things like that, it just didn't really make sense to sell it in that kind of market. But the implication was given that if you sell fresh credits, like, hot off the sun credits, that they would be worth more in the market versus older credits. Is that correct?
That's what I heard as well from the presenter.
Yes, that's the information that we gathered.
But I also heard the phrase "no rhyme or reason for price variations." Is there going to be any kind of data modeling that occurs that can give us a better picture of what things are worth and when?
Well, I think the best way to kind of find a price with that would be to talk with a broker, because the broker wasn't able to give us a projection on cost or on price. And historically, from talking with OUC, they didn't have any kind of data that showed a trend. So I guess the best way would be to interact with the broker and see what you could sell today, and then you find out where the market is, see if they keep in contact with you.
So I think I shared that at one point in my career, I did launch a brokerage platform for renewable energy credits. That was in a compliance state. And that's a state where the sellers of retail electricity were obligated to provide a certain percentage of their electricity from renewable resources. And there were penalties if they did not meet those criteria. So that penalty effectively set the cap on what the market would trade at. So if, for example, credits were selling for at a penalty of $300 or $400 or $500 per credit, you could expect that trades would occur probably about $100 below that number is what we saw the market settle in at. But now this is 15 to 20 years ago in the compliance markets. The compliance markets, for example, I was more familiar with New Jersey. The credits are trading at about $140 to $200 a credit, I believe. That's quite a hefty sum in a compliance market. The point being that if you have a compliance market where there's a penalty if you don't comply, it'll drive the value of the renewable energy credit to some threshold just below the penalty. Florida is a voluntary market. It's not a compliance market. So it's purely in the eyes of the beholder, what they're willing to pay for credits at that point in time. So there's no firm established market, and there's very little transparency and disclosure on what dollar value of the trades actually occurred at. Is that correct, Robert?
Yeah, that's kind of how the broker explained it to us.
Right. So it's not like, for example, if we use the real estate analogy, you look at Zillow or Reddit, you can kind of say, oh, those prices are real because you can actually trace that back to records of sales on homes. There are not many public records of what people actually sold their credits at, unless they were sold by an entity that had to disclose, for example, a municipal. But otherwise, you might not see what they're actually transacted at.
Got it. So a company, like a private entity, like it was referenced as an example, Amazon, for their carbon neutral goals, they could buy our credits at some price. We don't know what. Is that only because they have the I guess, a corporate structure where they have facilities in different states and they can kind of transfer that carbon reduction to a different state. I'm confused.
Yeah,
Why a
yeah,
private with that?
yeah, they can do that to some extent within their global portfolio, and I call that, a feel good or pride type credits where they want to, show the world that they're investing in renewable energy and encouraging renewable energy projects to happen by having bought the credits from them so that those projects could be more successful. But they would not have a requirement to disclose publicly what they actually paid for those credits. In our particular case, or in the case of FMPA or OUC, unless the transaction was covered by a specific confidentiality with the buyer, they would probably not disclose, they would not have to disclose uh, their actual pricing. For example, I would suspect that Florida Power and Light, if they're selling their credits, they're probably not disclosing the price. That's my suspicion. So there's no good clearinghouse for what credits trade at.
Do they disclose the buyer though?
They might not, no.
So we don't
Not
even
a-
know how to identify buyers.
In the voluntary markets, it's there's a private transaction, and you're relying on those parties to voluntarily disclose the volume and the price at which they bought or sold RECs.
Right. So I'm assuming that the broker's job would be to identify the buyers and set the pricing in the negotiations.
Correct. The broker manages the negotiation between the buyer and the seller. That's how it worked to some extent in the market that I was operating in with the team that I built. But that was a compliance market, and those trades were ultimately, if I remember correctly, they were reported to the state because they tracked them. You had to disclose to be a participant in the market. So if you didn't disclose that information, you cannot participate in the market and get credit as a buyer for having bought them.
Is OUC selling a large portion of their credits? Would you know?
My understanding is that they are, but and they have given us ranges which are consistent with what we heard in this presentation. But it's my understanding that they are. Robert, you have that sense as well, or what do you hear from OUC?
I know they're selling some of Harmony, but I can't speak to the percentage or the number of megawatt hours.
Yeah, because I'm thinking since we personally don't know who the buyers are and the price they're paying, and we have, say, a lot of solar coming online 2026 and beyond, that would technically saturate the market for credits at that point in time, and then we'd be competing for buyers, which would potentially drive the price down in this voluntary state. That be a correct assumption?
This is Ed speaking. I think that's certainly possible that there's an awful lot of solar, being built in the state, and I don't mean awful in a negative sense. There's a lot of solar being built in the state. The question is, are there enough buyers? So I think that's reasonable to think that there may be more supply than there's going to be demand in a voluntary market that would keep the prices low. The way I saw it work in the compliance market, they had these step up requirements each year or every few years. The percentage of a retail energy seller, those were unbundled markets, for example. So there were marketers selling electricity. Those marketers had increasing requirements for the percentage of their product that had to come from renewable resource. So there was constant upward pressure on the price of the RECs because the percentage requirement on the part of the sellers was going up and up and up. The sellers of electricity. So the producers of the renewable energy credits were being sought by those buyers, and that was putting upward pressure on the market.
Is there any indication from the federal government or state government about any policy decisions that would lead us toward a compliance market for the state of Florida?
I have heard of zero. Maybe FMPA has heard of more efforts, but I don't see any movement in that direction in Florida.
No, I haven't heard anything either.
Well, I open the floor to more questions from our board members, if they have any questions or comments.
To add one more point to that, to state regulation, and I think Ramsey Stevens might have seen this nationally in his work, is the compliance states really drove the markets on these products, and it was done to help spur the market. The compliance states put these renewable portfolio standards in place, which required these percentages, and that put the onus or drove people to actually invest in solar projects and build large solar farms. In the state of Florida, that seems to be happening without that regulatory motivator. And solar is growing quite steadily in the state of Florida. I don't know if Ramsey Stevens is what he's seen, because he's out and about the country, looking at these types of things.
I mean, Director, that's spot on. I would just say, it would certainly be a lot nicer for all of us if these credit markets, and I'll throw in the LCFS credits specifically that come out of the California Air Resources Board, were homogenized a little better around the country. Because, I will say, this is totally an aside, but and this call's evidencing it actually very materially. They're very hard to monetize efficiently, but they're worth monetizing. So that's, I appreciate what FMPA's outlined here. Director, I think you've got a very good process here to move forward with. So, my general recommendation is that we defer to you and FMPA to just keep moving this forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that fair to say? I know that was a little circuitous, but that's.
I know when you say move the ball forward in terms of maintaining current and knowledge, or would you suggest that the city should consider selling its credits at some point?
No, I would very much formally recommend that you all consider selling these. Yeah, I don't think selling them to the customer base is really going to get a premium of any kind at any point that would be worth the additional transactional cost that would go with that. Could be wrong, but that just seems like a lot of bandwidth. We are a city that needs cash. We're a utility that needs cash. And while I hear my fellow board members' concerns about, yet again, the efficient pricing of these things, I can speak from professional experience, as the director is alluding to, that these markets are incredibly inefficient. So, I would trust that FMPA and director, in your capacity as a board member, that you all will do your due diligence in the business terms that you enter into, both with our sell side brokers and ultimately with the customers they identify. But yeah, frankly, if these things are worth 1 cent on the dollar, something is better than nothing, is my general recommendation.
Right. So that would, of course, require to massage the language of the city's goal to achieve net zero, because we would be, of course, selling these credits. So there are very large.
Well, hold on.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Director, I know there was a comment earlier that was kind of in contravention with that. I actually take the opposite read personally, that no matter what, we have the credits because we have actually taken the material steps towards decarbonization, right? You have gone out and made procurement for us that are cost competitive, but also carbon competitive. Selling the credit, yes, I understand there's a double accounting issue, but I come back to, we've done the material thing to reduce our actual carbon intensity. If we can sell these, ancillary incentives, I don't know what you want to call them, sell the credits and then reinvest those proceeds in further real decarbonization, I think we should do that and not worry about the double accounting issue. That's my 2 cents. That
I think
So-
your perspective is consistent with what I saw with many of our large, Fortune 500 or some cases Fortune 100 companies that we transacted with, and they were trying to do good and monetize it, and then they were reinvesting in additional greening efforts on their own. So that was the process that they were using, and they
I go. No, Director, continue. Sorry.
Yep, they were also companies that were being quite public about their sustainability efforts and renewable energy efforts, and this was making projects possible because it helped them cross the threshold where the project was economic for them to go ahead and do it because they were generating credits that they could then sell.
Right. So that speaks to, I think, my prior point is that we're in this weird situation where we did not need these credits to make a market-based decision to make these decarbonization investments that you've made, right? So
Right.
the credits are kind of after the fact gravy for us. So I say sell the gravy and still take the real decarbonization credit that actually counts, as and it's not like there's any authority other than ourselves assessing the mechanism by which we achieve our decarbonization goals, right? So I think that's also worth noting that our it's not like when come 2045 there's some outside party that's going to say to the commission, well, shame on you, you didn't adhere to your own laws. So I think that's actually important to note here. And then to your point about the reality of the market and us being self-evident case study number 1 here, even parties that may today not be making material decarbonization investments because they're buying our credits, I think we can all probably confidently assume the market will still incentivize them to make real investments further down the line. So that's kind of my read, that I wouldn't be worried about double counting either on our side or on our buyer side if you're really concerned about decarbonization.
So, Mr.
Very good points for policymakers to really discuss and think through. Very good points.
Yeah, so Mr. Stevens, would your recommendation then be to sell 100% of the renewable credits?
I'd offload these things as fast as possible. Better a bird in the hand than 2 in the bush. Looking at how the market is continuing to go, I think what matters is the money we all stand to gain and save collectively, individually, through smart investments like our utility have made in the real decarbonization technology itself. But no, sorry. I'm definitely in favor of offload these things as fast as possible.
So it's more of a
and get more of them, right? Let me just say, if these things become so valuable, I think that's really what I'm ultimately trying to say here is if there is some market shift where the RECs actually do have a material premium, and we're looking back and saying, oh man, had we held on to these things, we'd be it's sitting pretty. I would argue in that scenario, the market would have matured to a place where we could just figure out, all right, so how do we make more investments in more solar to generate more RECs, right? Then the RECs would actually have the value that Director Liberty alluded to for the Fortune 500s and the companies he's transacted with historically, right? Where you get what I'm saying? If the premium shows up, we can then just figure out, all right, is the premium sufficient for us to make the investments to do the work to get more of these things? Right now, that premium is not there, right? So I get it.
So I was trying to kind of come to conclusion for the decision. Would it be more of a fiscal decision where we can get some monetary value versus a feel-good decision towards the net neutral goals, right? So that's the argument here, is one versus the other.
Yeah, no, I would say we've done the feel good part already. We've even done the fiscal part already. That's kind of the irony here. These things are not a fiscal motivator at this time for us. They're not informing any. It's not like we're sitting here saying, well, we need to sell these RECs to make the solar work. We already made the solar work. So yeah, I see very little. I'm struggling to come up with a reason why we would hold on to them. I would invite my fellow board members to prove me wrong, right? Or propose a scenario where these things have more value in the future from a financial perspective than they do today. And if they do, how we couldn't then just go out and generate more of them if the market warranted it.
Yep, valid points. Any board members want to chime in? I think the goal is to make a recommendation today for the electeds to ponder at a future meeting.
I agree. If you can sell it and get any market value for it, it's worth doing. It's free money. So that's my recommendation, is to get what we can.
Yeah, I see the point that we could always use the revenue. And, I guess we don't have to, we're not required to reduce our carbon emissions. I mean, we have our goals. So I'm still not sure on whether the whole renewable credits is a good thing or a bad thing, in the big picture nationwide. But if we want to sell ours, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
not positive that I'm okay with it. I'm just kind of leaning towards okay. Because it seems like, we could benefit, and I don't see any drawbacks.
Well, if we were to make a motion with the recommendation, that's where we'd probably want to get to consensus on the motion itself.
Yeah, and I'll jump, Mr. Chairman, if I jump back in here again, I mean, I would be willing to make a motion saying we recommend that the city pursue a sale of these things with FMPA, subject to normal transactional due diligence to ensure, best proceeds possible, best dollar. And then to my fellow board members who are really concerned about how this overall market structure impact actual investments in decarbonization, I would be willing to add the amendment that any proceeds should be reinvested in additional decarbonization investments for our utility, right? That we take the proceeds and push the marginal investment curve on the decarb side even further. That said, I would really, really like the potholes on my street fixed. I'd really, really like an additional street sweeper. My point though, and I'm not being facetious here. My point here is that, this money does matter to large parts of our community right now that are suffering from deep disinvestment, right? Our utility might be in great shape, but large parts of our city are not. So sorry to not sugarcoat things here. Yeah.
Go back a second. Were you willing to make that motion, or are you actually making?
I mean, I'm grandstanding here a little bit to complain about the potholes on my street and the general condition of my neighborhood right now. But yeah, in all sincerity, I think what I'd say the compromise would be push for a sale, but use the proceeds for additional decarbonization for the utility.
Well, how much would go to decarbonization? How much would go to fixing your potholes?
Well, I think Mr. Sims, the potholes need to be fixed through other more appropriate means, right? So I would say, in this context, 100 cents on the dollar from the the renewable energy credits should go to additional renewable energy or storage, or, you know, I would defer to the director here as to where these marginal investments could best be targeted, right? Energy efficiency. I mean, I would defer to the utility in that regard.
Would you put into the category of the broad category of renewable energy projects?
Yeah, if you, however you want to look at it, I would totally defer to you. I would just say that the proceeds from this should stay with the utility and should be targeted towards additional decarbonization, right? Reducing our collective carbon footprint as much as possible.
How would that be done? The solar fields are outside. Well, we have a solar field in our city, but most of the solar is outside the city. How would
So I
this
mean,
revenue go to us decarbonizing more? How would that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the funds could, I mean, yet again, I would defer to the director here. I don't think this has to be decided right now. It could be further charging stations. That's a selfish request from my perspective. It could be for, you know, maybe a little rooftop solar somewhere on one of the city facilities. Yet again, I would defer to the director. I could be for even like targeted micro grants that could be distributed through self. I mean, I think that's a whole other conversation, but that would be the compromise. I'm still coming back to this, that we vote for the sale, we unload these things as fast as possible, but use it for further decarbonization.
Would you envision the funds from the sale of going into a dedicated fund similar to, for example, we have a storm fund that's going to be formed. We have a rate stabilization fund. Would you create a third fund, if you will, where these proceeds would go in there and then be released for specific activities?
I mean, director, if that is within your administrative bandwidth at this time, I don't think that would hurt. But I'm not sure that the amount of money we're talking about is worth imposing that administrative cost on you.
Well, there's not much administrative. Yeah, there's not much administrative cost. That's just a matter of finance creating a separate fund and then having, you know, accounting for the dollars going in. So that you'd have the sale of the credits, and then the proceeds from the sale would then go into that fund, and then the fund would be administered at the discretion of the city commission in
As
terms of
opposed
what
to
it
the
would be
general
spent
fund.
on.
Then I think that's great. I think that actually lays the groundwork potentially for that fund to hopefully be used for other profitable decarbonization opportunities for us in the future. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but yeah.
I think battery energy storage. I think additional LED lighting, let's say electric vehicles, solar demonstration or some particular education thing that's specifically renewable. I'm just thinking out loud the types of things, but it would not be used, for example, to go buy another wooden pole, or to put diesel fuel in a truck, right? It would go towards something that's purely renewable in nature and purpose.
You bring up a good point too. If these funds come in, would they be subject to the maximum 8% like the general fund is for other departments?
All revenue to the utility is hit with the 8% test and pulled.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's the way it currently works. All revenue into the utility, regardless of the source, is eligible for 8% transfer. It's actually 8 to 10%, but it's normally around 8%. But the city's fiscal policy allows up to 10% of the revenue to go.
So 92 cents on the dollar, or 90 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, it was very astute. So we have actually had some transactions where the 8% exceeds the net profit on the deal. So that happens to us, for example, on gas capacity. In some years where the city takes 8% of the total volume of the deal, which includes the gas price, but it's the 8% is greater than the markup, but they take it all. So the utility actually loses money on those transactions in some cases.
Director, I'm sorry if this is an aside and I should have asked in the board comments, but in your capacity as an FMEA officer, are you concerned about any of the current legislation in Tallahassee relating to this specific issue, and our non-Lake Worth Beach served customers?
Chair, you want me to comment on that? I certainly can.
Is that relevant to this discussion?
That's a separate subject, but I can comment on it if you want to come back to it before we wrap up.
Could I
tonight.
ask, Director, that you address it in your liaison comments at the end of our meeting here?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let's try to keep it on topic. So I'm assuming that we all have an opinion on this, that we can solidly form a motion to actually present to the commission. Is that correct?
I mean, I'll make my aforementioned motion. I vote that that the Lake Worth Beach Electric Utility and city pursue a path to monetize its current RECs in conjunction with FMPA or independent of FMPA, depending on how the transactional process goes, with the explicit caveat that any proceeds are reinvested in a dedicated fund for additional decarbonization, subject to the utility franchise tax that we impose ourselves.
All right, do I have a second on that?
And if there are no seconds, I'll invite friendly amendments.
Yeah, well, we can't discuss it without a second.
Okay. I'll second.
Okay, so now discussion. I think as the motion stands, it makes sense. That's everything we talked about so far.
All right, so as the motion stands, we're committed to 100% of the revenue going to more decarbonization. We wouldn't split a little bit off for the general fund of the city.
Well, as the motion
No,
stands,
the 8.
yeah, as the motion stands, that is correct. It would all go into a fund, but there is an umbrella policy that basically says that 8 to 10% will go to the other uses.
What the city would take 8% of what we sell as like a tax.
Yeah, I guess you can call it a tax. It's an inner city tax. It's basically any revenue the utility generates goes toward the general fund. That can be lessened in future years. It all depends on who is the current commission or the
Wait a
future
minute,
commission.
any revenue that the utility generates goes to the general fund. So how much could we put into decarbonization of these?
Well, assuming that
In practice,
yeah, go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to make the example, like say we sold $100,000 of credits, right? $92,000 would go into this fund. That's my assumption.
Which fund?
The fund that Mr. Stevens just proposed, a renewable capital improvement project fund. I wasn't exactly sure of what you called it, but
Or
A new-
92,000
I would use the
would go
term
there,
de-
and
I would use
other
the term de-
8,000 would go to the city?
there's some overlap here with the comments. Mr. Stevens, what did you say?
I was saying that I would call it a decarbonization fund specifically.
Decarbonization fund. And Mr. Sims, can you repeat what you said?
All right, so you said out of 100,000, 92,000 would go to the decarbonization fund, and where would the other 8,000 go?
The general fund.
So
All right.
yeah, and so my motion specifically, Mr. Sims, is that we 100 cents on the dollar, subject to our self-imposed utility franchise tax or franchise fee, would go into this fund. So the net, we would direct as much of the proceeds as we possibly can, but net the fee that we impose on all utility revenue, which is this 8 to 10%, depending on the year that we're talking about. The year
Yeah,
the
let-
year
let
in
me-
which the revenue is actualized. Yeah.
This is at liberty. Let
But-
me provide a little bit more clarification and transparency on what effectively happens. So, effectively, roughly, according to the city's fiscal policy, the city can take 8 to 10% of utility revenues for the general fund. They tend to run in the 8% range, but they could be higher. So the way that we look at this is they look at our expected revenue for the year, total revenue, which includes, by the way, PCA, and they take roughly 8% of that, or sometimes a little bit less, but nominally 8%. So the way that we manage, we think of this as, hey, every dollar that comes in, 8 cents of it has got to go to the general fund. So that they don't specifically reach into a particular transaction. It's just done as a gross amount. That's how they set the transfer at about 8%. And the fiscal policy allows them to go as high as 10% if they choose to. In addition to that, there are other transfers out of the utility, which are more along the line of what I would call shared services, where we pay a portion of the cost of operating, purchasing and legal and city manager's office, the city commission, all that type of stuff, joint expenses of the city. And they might be called administrative charges. We pay a separate fee for IT services, a separate fee for fleet, for vehicles, and management of the vehicles by fleet. So it can be rather substantial, but the general fund transfer alone is in that 8 to 10% range, and it tends to run mostly down around 8%. And it's done on a total revenue basis, which includes all revenue, including PCA, for example.
And in theory, it can go down to 0% if the electeds chose to, correct?
If they chose to, yeah, they could take it down to 0. In the case of Lake Worth Beach, I don't think the city could operate that. That number is in the $5 million range annually. That would be a rather significant hit, I think, to the city to have to operate without that transfer.
Correct. I'm just trying to point out that the 8% isn't like the minimum. It's just what they're at right now.
Correct. It's thereabouts. And it's somewhat discretionary based on the recommendations of the city manager and director of finance and what the city commission is attempting to do to balance the budget, maintain taxes. And I wouldn't want people to think that this is something that's just unique to Lake Worth Beach. This is very common in the municipal industry. And matter of fact, it's very common in utility holding companies. So for example, I'm sure that FPL has a transfer up to NextEra. That's an internal decision. They own the business and they take a portion of the profits up to the parent company. It goes up in different ways, but that's not unusual. Same thing as if you had multiple small businesses of your own, each small business is creating profit for the overall, owner of the group.
Yep.
In the case of Lake Worth, in the municipals, they're doing that to support their city government and make services available that they would otherwise have to either not provide or increase taxes to achieve.
And thank you for the explanation. Mr. Sims, did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion that's on the floor? All right, seeing that there's no other comments or discussion, we can call it to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, none opposed. So I guess it's unanimous that the board will make this recommendation. I guess I'm not sure, Mr. Director Liberty, at the next meeting or a future meeting, whenever it's appropriate to bring up.
Just a suggested point of order as a non-board member, just to confirm that you do have a quorum tonight. Suhey, is that correct? Do we have a quorum?
Yeah, I asked that in the beginning and she said we did.
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right.
We-
I missed that.
Yeah, we have four members here.
Okay. Just didn't want to get stuck on a technicality later on if somebody said, oh, we don't have a quorum, but no, you're good.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much for the presentation, and we look forward to seeing this brought up at the future commission meeting and seeing where it goes.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any more questions for our guests tonight from FMPA? Sounds like none.
Will they be giving the same exact presentation at a future commission meeting?
I would suggest that they would, yes.
All right.
You
I
know,
would
together with any,
sorry,
yeah,
the delay.
together with any updates that you know would occur in the marketplace between now and when that presentation actually takes place.
Yeah.
My assumption is that we would probably not try to squeeze this onto a February agenda, which would be February 27th. My assumption is that the earliest we would bring this forward would be March, and you know, following some one-on-ones to get the timing and when the commission would like to bring this subject up.
Yeah, my only
But we can
comment.
certainly,
Sorry, go ahead.
we can certainly report out that this initiative has taken place.
Okay. Yeah, my only comment was on the presentation itself. I would just suggest to slow it down just a notch because a lot of the slides have a lot of information on them.
I think that's a good point. This group has had it, you know, two runs at it. So, and you've had some time to think about it, but sure, the commission would be seeing it for the first time.
That was it.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll just move on. We're going to skip over board comments since we already did that. Let's move on to the board liaison comments. Well, report and comments.
Okay, so Ramsey Stevens brought up a point, you know, with respect to legislative initiatives in Tallahassee at the moment in the session. As some of you may know, over the past few years, there have been multiple attempts that seem to be gaining steam every year, getting a little bit more headway each year on somehow restricting transfers to the general fund by utilities. And it's not from municipal utilities. It's not just the electric utility, which is what we tend to think about, but it's also water, sewer, and natural gas. And so there's a concern among certain regulators or legislators in the state that that rates may be excessive because funds are transferred to the city that owns the utility, or that investment is not being made in the utility because so much money is being transferred to that utility's, you know, parent, which is the municipality. So there have been efforts that don't get very far every year, but they get far enough each year to get closer and closer. There's also a concern with respect to what's referred to as extraterritorial customers, meaning customers that are outside of the city limits of the entity. So, for example, us as an electric utility, we serve portions of the unincorporated county and the village of Palm Springs, neither of which are within our city. And it goes back to the taxation without representation argument that cities are making decisions which affect financially, you know, folks that are not in a position to vote for the governing body. That's a little bit less of an issue in municipalities where the utility operates as a separate authority, separate from the city. But that's not the case on Lake Worth Beach. We are a department of the city. We are not a separate utility authority. So some of the others that are authorities might, for example, be the Keys. That's a separate authority. GRU, Gainesville, is a separate authority. There's a few others around the state. Orlando Utilities Commission is a separate authority. So we are not. We are a department of the city. So we are not, however, the target that the legislators appear to be aware of or trying to get at. We are certainly on their radar, but I don't think that we are the reason why they're doing this. So each year, this initiative gets a little bit further. And more lately, they've been looking at somehow limiting the transfer to the general fund by to a certain percentage, and also looking to limit the surcharge, for example, that's placed on extraterritorial customers. So, for example, our city's water utility has a surcharge on extraterritorial customers. The argument in favor of surcharges on the extraterritorial customers is sometimes looked at in a sense of capital investment that's required. So, for example, we've made a sizable investment in infrastructure to serve customers who are outside the city limits. Those customers didn't have to, enter into agreements with other utilities or build their own utility. We did that as a city, and that obligation to pay back those bonds, to the extent that we sold bonds to make those investments, is on the city. It's not on the extraterritorial customer. It's a revenue bond obligation of the city. Same thing would happen, for example, in water and sewer, where you build water and sewer infrastructure outside of your city limits to serve those customers. Those municipalities that you reached into, they did not have to build their own water facilities or wastewater treatment facilities because they're receiving that service from the city. So there's a question of equity. Should they have to pay extra because they're really leaning on the creditworthiness and counting on the city that provided the service to actually invest and pay for that infrastructure? So those types of debates are happening in Tallahassee. The issue of somehow capping the ability to transfer to the general fund of the cities, there was a formula concocted which tied to the allowable return on equity of the investor-owned utilities in the state. So for those of you that are not aware, investor-owned utilities are regulated in how much money they can make, and that is usually defined as the return on equity or the ROE that they can make on the equity that they've invested in the business. And that can run anywhere between 8.5% to 10.5%, depending on the utility, the jurisdiction, the year, the political climate, but in that range of 8.5% to 10.5%. So the thought was that the utilities general fund transfers statewide should somehow be limited to the average of the return on equity of the investor-owned utilities in the state. That doesn't seem to be getting much traction. They're more focused on the surcharge. They're more focused on ensuring that there is representation on governing boards by customers who are outside the territory. So, for example, some of you recall that it's for some time we had, I think it was Roger, was it St. Simon? I think is his last name, that was sat on this advisory board, represented the village of Palm Springs or that area. We have not been able to find anybody in that area that wants to sit on the advisory board anymore. I don't know if you would call it apathy or they're very content with the service, but they're not sitting on the board right now. So that's one of the things that this potential legislation would do, would be to provide for representation from customers outside of the city limits, either directly on a city commission where they're voting on utility matters or on advisory boards. So that's the type of stuff that's going on in Tallahassee. I can share with you that as an officer and board member of the Florida Municipal Electric Association, our lobbyists and our staff in Tallahassee are following the issue very closely and working to educate legislators on the pros and cons of these types of decisions. But more importantly, what I've been able to do locally is, as representing FMEA, is speak with one of the more vocal proponents of this legislation, which is local Representative Caruso, and been able to speak with them and share with them the great inroads we've made in terms of rates reductions, in terms of reliability improvements, and financial investment that we're making outside of the city to better serve the customers outside of the city. So that's a lot of information I just dumped on you. I'll take some questions if you have them, or we can move on.
No, thank you, Director. Your leadership is greatly appreciated up there.
Okay. I was recently at the legislation in Tallahassee at the FMEA legislative rally and board meeting, and I was able to sit in on one of the Senate hearings on these types of subjects. That particular day they were talking about pipeline permitting, and I know that Commissioner Malega was making the rounds at the legislature herself that day with the city's lobbyists with Richard Pinsky. So various commissioners have been up there and you know, making the case for the city on not just utility legislation, but other items as well. Okay.
Nope, sorry, I was on mute. Well, thank you for the updates. I believe that's all we have then. Is there anything else that you wish to discuss, Director Liberty, or are we good to adjourn?
I can just, provide, high level updates. The same as I provide the commission, we have a group training for the upcoming Lineman's Rodeo later this month. We do have our apprentices going through their apprenticeship program. We have a tremendous amount of construction underway. We are looking very closely at the grant. We continue to talk closely with the Department of Energy folks on the requirements and a lot of reporting requirements in order to receive these grant dollars as we go through the program over the next 5 years. So we are getting our arms around that. A lot of documentation around community benefits and community benefit activities and objectives. So we're working on that. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that we can maximize the use of the grant dollars. So the grant dollars are certainly impressive, $23.4 million. The trick, though, is that we have to match it with $23.4 million. So we have to come up with the match. So it's our intention to provide the match from existing bond funds that we have raised. So we'll exhaust the bond funds that we've currently raised, and we're doing the math on the next bond issue that we would have to make, which would have dollars in there for the match. So the good news is that a lot of the match dollars, or a lot of the projects that the DOE has elected to fund through the grant, are the types of things that we're intending to do already under existing bond funds, or had planned to raise in the future with bond funds. So it's not like we're going to go do things that we would not have otherwise done, and now we have to go borrow money to match. So these are all things that are in that circle of friendship, if you will, in terms of the things that we wanted to do with system hardening, reliability improvement, utility capital investment down the road. So it does match up. Things like, for example, battery energy storage. That's been on my wish list of something we wanted to do, and the grant makes it possible to do that, even though we had not actually raised money yet to do it. So it makes it possible to go and do that. So there's some really, really good things that we can do. So we're working to get that math right and come up with the best way to match the dollars. That's well underway. I think that's a good summary of what we have. And other than to say that some of you may be familiar that we applied for grants in what we call Topic Area 1 and Topic Area 2. And we were successful in Topic Area 2, so we are reapplying under Topic Area 1. And we're targeting a $50 million, it's $50 million. We have submitted what's referred to as a concept paper, and we're awaiting feedback on acceptance of the concept paper. If the concept paper is accepted by the DOE, then we'll follow up with an application. So we got that far before in Topic Area 1, although we were not awarded any of the dollars. The dollars that we got were in Topic Area 2, but we are going to go back in and try to get another bite at the apple on Topic Area 1 for at least $50 million. We'll see how successful we are. And that will also be focused on grid resilience and hardening and system improvements.
Here.
We're getting we're getting at bats. We're going to get swings at the ball. I can't guarantee you that we'll get a single, a double, or triple, but we're still trying, and we'll keep
Fingers
trying.
crossed. That's
Yes, yes. I think we've kept our guests for a long time. I don't know if FMPA is still on, but they could certainly exit if they wanted to. But that's all I have for tonight.
Okay. Well, yes, thank you for coming. I actually just reminded myself of one question because I remember we talked about the billing software off and on throughout the years. There was an issue recently where there might have been some overlap in when people's bills were being sent out when they haven't submitted their payment yet, and it came in at looking like a double bill. Was that a limited issue, or is that like citywide?
Now that's a limited issue, as I understand it, and it partly has to do with the extreme lag time. We give a very generous period to pay bills. It's about 10 or 11 days longer than FPL. So sometimes what happens is, on some accounts, the way the cycles work out, the next bill goes out before the customer's paid the prior bill. Or there's some kind of an overlap in the system that does that, and it's normal, and it does confuse people. They believe they've gotten a double bill, but they haven't. I think our customer service manager, Nanette McTagg, she can explain it much better than I can. So it does happen on occasion.
David, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just remembered something I'd like to mention. I spoke with a resident on North K, like 11 or 1200 block, maybe 1300. And he said he called the utility and was not able to talk to a customer service person. He got like automated service, and he had a problem. He needed to talk to someone. He was not able to talk to somebody about it.
Was
Well, that would be unusual. Was he reporting an outage, or was it some other customer service matter?
It was an issue with his bill. His bill shot way up, and he wanted to talk to somebody about it. He wanted to understand what was going on. It seems to be a possible appliance issue in his home. He said he replaced some things and it went down, but he wanted to talk to someone at the utility just to confirm that it wasn't a mistake. And he said he was frustrated that he couldn't get a hold of an actual person.
Well, we have two phone lines. One is for outages and the other is for customer service issues. So he would have used the one for customer service issue. I can report that I can't remember a day when our call wait times were over a minute. So our call wait times on those two lines, either outages or customer service, are generally under a minute. If you went back 2, 3, or 4 years, they might have been, 4 or 5, even 10 minutes, 20 minutes on some days. So those calls are answered very, very quickly. There is also an option, I believe, for the customer to leave a number and to be called back at. Having said that, I am aware that about 2 weeks ago, if I remember correctly, there was a glitch with AT&T where the phones were ringing and not going through. But that was a telephone issue with AT&T, not necessarily with our call center. So we actually have a very, very close, tight time. Like I said, under a minute, virtually. I get a report on it at 4 o'clock every day. We have a conference call, and the call center gives me their statistics for the day, literally 4 o'clock every day. And I can't remember a day other than that glitch with AT&T a few weeks ago when it took more than a minute to get to a live operator.
Or maybe it was that day, or maybe he just didn't dial the call right, or I don't know.
It could be.
I'm just
It could be.
relaying
We
what
get
I've
between 6,000 to 9,000 phone calls a month into our system, and call wait times are running under a minute on most days. It's a real testament to the work that Nanette has done in turning things around on the customer service side.
Yeah, I have good things to say about Joel Rutsky. I had an issue with my bill. It seemed abnormally high, and I emailed Joel Rutsky directly, and he admitted that there was a copy and paste error with the SolarNet metering adjustments. and he was able to reinstitute my bill, but that just caused more problems. So 2 or 3 bills later, it was finally correct. But then I got caught up in that overlap issue that I brought up earlier. So
Right.
I think we're finally at a good place now where my bill is actually showing the proper usage. Yeah, I actually had an issue with my air condition maintenance plan that somehow they broke my air handler, and I was leaking Freon, causing my air handler to work overtime, and I was trying to figure out where the extra energy was going. So through some trial and error and looking at the bills and when exactly the problem started with Joel's reports, I was able to pinpoint it was my AC service tech that
Right.
caused my electric bill to go up. So
I had a similar thing in my home. The refrigerant line corroded, and I lost refrigerant. My system was running and running and running, and I wasn't getting any cooler. But with that problem you had with the net metering bill, was that recent in this last cycle?
no, I think that was going back to October.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Because we had Naviline, which is the city's computer system, a Central Square product, created a net metering module. They did not have one. They created one. We paid them to create it to support net metering. And my understanding is that this is the first year it's going into use. I was wondering if that was a recent problem or something happened in the past. I was not aware that you had had a problem, so either they didn't want me to know about it or it was easy to fix.
Yeah, someone transposed the tens digit. So
Okay.
it wasn't even that big of an issue. It just so happened to coincide with my extra usage because of my air conditioning. So
Okay.
yeah, I probably wouldn't even have noticed it had I not brought it up. But they said that someone transposed a number in like either a copy and paste or just manually typing something in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the net metering program is growing quite well. I want to say we add, 3, 4, 5 accounts a month. We're up to 260 plus, I believe. I think there's 50 or 60 on the waiting list. They're not waiting for us. They're working with their contractors. Some of them are quite old, so we don't know if some of those projects are on hold, maybe never happening, but the program continues to grow.
Yeah, the only thing I've heard is from someone recently is a complaint where they were trying to get a permit for solar and they're still using the PV watts calculation, and they're using that as a diehard cap of what they cannot go over, even though the calculation itself says it lends itself to like plus or minus 3 to 5% error. So I'm not sure if there's still issues with getting permits in that regard.
Well, but our process requires the use of PV watts, and that's the one that's the most common one out there is PV watts now, and that's just working. It doesn't have the roof slope of every single roof or the shading or the actual orientation east, west, north, south. So it's a rough estimator anyway. But we want the system to be smooth. We don't want to have to get out there and start measuring slopes on roofs and calculating shading on a case-by-case basis. We just want it to be a blanket, simple way of doing it and say, that's close enough, let's go.
Yeah, I forget what the exact issue was. I didn't write it down. They didn't send me it by email. It's just a casual conversation. But I do know that they were having an issue with the amount of kilowatts of the size of the panels.
Right.
So I just told him to contact Joel Retsky and work it out.
Yep. He's on top of that stuff. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm not sure if we have another meeting planned, if there's anything on the horizon for this board to discuss. I know our last meeting was in November. So Director Liberty, do you foresee anything within the next month or two?
Probably not within the next, maybe in a couple of months, but the next big thing for us will be when we get the grant agreement in place. And we actually then kick off a bunch of community engagement activities. There'll be probably a lot more activity with the board. Because one of the things that the federal government wants to see is a lot more engagement with the community in regards to the projects that are being implemented with grant funds. So there'll be a flurry of activity as we go through the next 5 years as we spend those dollars that involve community engagement.
Great, looking forward to it. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, and second?
Second.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, and thank you to our friends from FMPA for attending.
Yes,
Good
thank you.
evening.